If you love wealth better than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, go from us in peace. We ask not your counsels or your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands which feed you. May your chains set lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you were our countrymen. Samuel Adams.
The time is near at hand, which must determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves. George Washington.
And what country can preserve its liberties if its rulers are not warned from time to time that this people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Thomas Jefferson.
Posterity, you will never know how much it cost the present generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it. If you do not, I shall repent in heaven that ever I took half the pains to preserve it. John Adams.
I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies, and that the principle of spending money to be paid by posterity under the name of funding is but swindling futurity on a large scale. Thomas Jefferson.
Government is instituted to protect property, this being the end of government. That alone is a just government, which impartially secures to every man whatever is his own. That is not a just government, nor is property secure under it, where arbitrary restrictions, exceptions, and monopolies deny to part of its citizens that free use of their own faculties. James Madison.
It would be an absurdity for jurors to be required to accept the judge's view of the law against their own opinion, judgment, and conscience. John Adams.
Whenever the legislators endeavored to take away and destroy the property of the people, or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people, who are thereupon absolved from any further obedience, and are left to the common refuge which God hath provided for all men against force and violence. John Locke.
It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here, idle? What is it that gentlemen wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but for me, give me liberty, or give me death. Patrick Henry.
My people perish for the lack of knowledge. God.
All right, we're back. Welcome to Patriots Lament. My name is Joshua Bennett. We'll be here the next couple of hours blabbering about this and that, like we always do. In the studio, of course, we got my buddy, co-host, Mr. Mike Anderson. Good morning, Mike Anderson.
Good morning.
And even better than this, both of us, we have a special guest returning back, one of my favorites, Mr. Adam Dick. Good morning, Adam. How you doing today? And I lost him. Wait a minute. Turned on. Yes? Hello? I'm on. And shoot, I heard him just a second ago. Oops. No. You there, Adam? Oh. Always. Do. Indigo. I know what you say. Let's try this again. Oh. Damn. We'll listen to a little skate. Boom.
Trying to call him back now, huh?
Yeah, why isn't it? Didn't you hear the boop, 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 boop? Oh, man. Hello? Oh, jeez. I'm sorry. It helps if I have the program buttons turned on. Good morning, Adam.
Hey, good morning. How are you doing?
We're doing great. Thanks for joining us again. Long time. Too long.
Oh, good to talk with you.
Good deal. Hey, well, let's just get right into it. What do you, there's so much. That's the problem when we wait too long. There's too much to catch up on. So I'll just let you take it. What's your, what do you want to discuss first here? School shootings, FISA.
Right now I'm reading through this indictment.
Which one?
13
Russians?
Russision people and 3 Russian companies. Have you you been paying any attention to that?
I just saw that yesterday. It's pretty, it kind of boggled my mind because it's like there's no, what?
Well, they indicted some troll group, didn't they? Some Russian troll group, and it had nothing to do with the administration.
Right. It was,
out.
or even the Russian government that it looked like. It was just their,
Nothing established, no clear link to the Russian government. No, apparently they talked to some Trump campaign people, like local campaign people, but there's no indication that those campaign people even knew who they were really talking to. And they put out a lot of social media posts, dealing with the campaign as 2016 campaign came around. But that's to be expected. That was a big topic of discussion, especially with Trump running. It made the campaign. For example, the Republican presidential debates had some really good ratings. People were very interested in what was going on, and with the high negatives of both Trump and Hillary Clinton in the campaign, that actually increased people's interest because people like to vote against somebody more than vote for them.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that's because there's often not somebody worth voting for among the main choices. At least there might be a third party candidate that will lose that you feel a lot of affinity for. But when you're looking at the big Republican and Democrat, it's who do you despise the most? So people are interested in finding out the nasty stuff about those people. So I kind of wonder if this is just a business that these people were in, and they realize, hey, if we want to rake in some money from advertising or whatever other means, the way to get people's attention, the way to get viewers over to us, is to talk about this election. It's one of the big topics of the day, and you can send out some incendiary stuff and create potential clients. Or if you have other people, if you have a more nefarious objective, maybe you could be able to get some credit card numbers or whatever from people. Whatever you're trying to get. Doing stuff about the election is a natural strategy.
Well, did they actually? Did they actually do anything that was that's illegal, or is this a new precedent?
And I'm saying, legitimate business and illegitimate business, whatever. If you want to get a lot of people's attention and make contacts with a lot of people, then potentially sell ads or whatever. Talking about the U.S. election to Americans is the way to go. And it's another interesting thing is they talk. The main illegal things they're talking about here are not reporting to the the Elections Commission, not reporting as a foreign agent, and people coming into the United States under the guise of coming here on vacation rather than for business related to this company. Well, when you look at the first two, just because these people are Russian, they're supposed to register as foreign agents, and they're supposed to file with the FEC in order to talk about elections. First of all, there's a in candidates. First of all, there's a big problem with that because we have a First Amendment here.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
Americans, anybody's free to talk about elections and politicians. And if you look at how the Supreme Court even looks at the First Amendment, that sort of speech is the most protected because the Supreme Court says that was in the forefront of the mind of the people who demanded that the First Amendment be included in the Constitution, was to protect that particular type of speech. It has more protection than other kinds of speech in the views of the Supreme Court. So these people and these businesses these Russians, they're exercising the most protected form of free speech. And every weekday morning here in Dallas, where I live, at 9 a.m., the BBC News comes on for an hour.
Yeah.
The U.S. government media, with NPR, partially funded by the U.S. government and carrying the National Public Radio name, is carrying the British broadcasting's news at 9 a.m. each morning for people to listen to. And they don't have to file with the FEC. They don't have to register as a foreign agent. In fact, RT only recently in the past year was required, and I believe wrongly so, because of the treatment of other media such as the BBC and plenty of others, to register as a foreign agent. It's a very unusual thing for a media type company, a company that writes and does shows about politics and elections, even if it's run explicitly by a foreign government, to have to register as a foreign agent. And people coming into the U.S. saying that they're here for a trip for pleasure rather than business. Well, first of all, you can be coming for a trip for pleasure and do some business on the side. That's fine. But sure, maybe some people misled the State Department or the guy at the airport about that. But people do that every day.
Yeah.
And technically, I guess it's illegal. But people are doing it all the time, and because of the main reason is they want to respect their privacy, right? They don't want to tell some guy at the airport and people at the State Department, what their business interests are, because it's none of the government's business. So that's technically maybe there's some violation here, but it's not an unusual one. It's not an earth-shaking one. There's really nothing here when you look at it. Nothing of consequence. They don't allege that the actions affected the election. They don't allege that the actions were taken in coordination with any of the campaigns. It's not shown that the Russian government was behind this. Even if the Russian government were behind this, they're talking about spending of a little over $1 million a month at the height of the operation, which is significant money. But it's nothing compared to the billions that the campaign spent. It's nothing compared to, and it's nothing compared to what the U.S. government regularly does in other countries to affect their elections.
Exactly. I don't think they register anything. And, I remember Angela Merkel talking bad about Trump before the election, and I didn't see it on German media. I saw it on American media. So I guess maybe she should register. I talked to my wife's uncle who's a Canadian about the election before too. Maybe he should register as a foreign agent, since he might have persuaded me to vote one way or the other.
It's got me wondering if my Russian in-laws come over, if I'm going to say, Mama, now you're in the free country, in the free world now, but you cannot talk politics with us at all, because we might all go to prison if you do, because you're not registered as a foreign agent.
It sounds like they're just trying to justify their job after they went on a unfounded witch hunt.
Well, they did that in the Cox case.
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing. They spent all the money, they had to justify it, put an innocent guy in prison.
I'll tell you one bad consequence of this can be, though, that the U.S. government and social media companies will use this as an excuse to crack down further.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that has already happened, with Twitter and Facebook being pulled in to talk to Congress, and result of them, talking about these these Russian bots and that they've identified that put out tweets like the famous one of Hillary Clinton kind of as a devil arm wrestling Jesus or something. It's these sorts of bizarre like memes that they put out, and this is and because of that, there's greater restrictions on Twitter, there's greater restrictions on Facebook than before, and this indictment talks about people from local Trump campaigns and other things talking to these individuals, not knowing they're talking to people who are Russian, like as if it matters, and that they're unwitting about this. So there could potentially be, greater restrictions on people communicating information from suspicious sources.
Now, when you say local, you mean just like some county organizer type local?
Looks like. I mean, one thing they did was they tried to organize a few rallies, and it seems that maybe they talked to some Trump local people in doing that, Trump supporters.
Didn't Newland go to Ukraine and pass cookies around?
Exactly. The U.S. government has done this more explicitly. I mean, the U.S. government has been behind actual, coups in places like Chile, in South America, in Central America. They supported a military dictatorship in Guatemala, and the U.S. Supported the Shah in Iran. It goes way back. The U.S. is continuing to do these sorts of things right now. The U.S. military is in Syria now, trying to prevent to counter Iran. It's trying to overthrow the Assad government there. The U.S. overthrew Iraq next door.
And you were just talking
Libya
about Tillerson.
with the help of European countries as well. So the U.S. is out there overthrowing governments.
You were just talking about Tillerson, I think it was a couple weeks ago, on the 5 Minute 5 Issues, kind of suggesting that a military coup in Argentina would be okay.
Oh, in Venezuela.
Or Venezuela, yeah.
Months back, President Trump had suggested that all options are on the table in dealing with Venezuela. People would take a double take. Venezuela, well, who cares? That's the Venezuelans' business. It's far away. They don't have a military to speak of that could threaten us. But what Trump was talking about was was talking about the conditions for people in Venezuela. Things are bad down in Venezuela, and it's the government's fault, he says.
Right.
And that goes back to something that a lot of Trump supporters had ridiculed during the campaign of this compassionate intervention type of basis, that was used by Hillary Clinton in support of the U.S. efforts to overthrow Gaddafi in Libya.
Right.
And it definitely flies in the face of what many of Trump's supporters saw as America First. America First would say Venezuela's problems are Venezuela's problems. We need to concentrate on American problems and making America better. Make America great again, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not overthrow Venezuela. Now, suggesting the U.S. military could go in there. Now, just a couple weeks ago, Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, was speaking at the University of Texas about Latin American matters, and he mentioned offhand that sometimes the way things have to work down south is a military coup comes in and makes things better. And he was talking about that in reference to Venezuela. So here we have the U.S., which has a history of helping coups be successful in other countries around the world, including in Latin America, having their Secretary of State, their top diplomat, suggesting that a coup might just be what is needed in Venezuela.
As we all know, Pinochet saved a lot of lives.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that was a U.S. Central Intelligence Agency back in that, and there's no doubt that the U.S. has for a long time had an interest in changing the government in Venezuela, mm-hmm. and is probably to some extent responsible for problems that are happening in Venezuela. Some of those problems certainly are due to the Venezuelans' own governments, as is the case around the world, right?
Sure. But don't
the
we have
U.S.
sanctions on them?
has had a hand in contributing. Just a couple of weeks before Tillerson made those comments, he made comments about North Korea in a Hoover Institution speech over in California. And Rex Tillerson explained then that he believed the U.S. sanctions were working because fishermen in North Korea, due to the food shortage there, were going out on kind of rickety boats with insufficient gasoline and becoming stranded, and the fishermen were washing up in a bad condition in Japan.
Jeez.
Or were dying on their ships. And to Tillerson, this was a sign of success of U.S. sanctions. And that just shows the brutality behind sanctions. You know, people think of sanctions as an alternative to war, a peaceful way to put pressure on another country. But as Tillerson explains and brags, the success of sanctions is measured by people dying and people suffering because they have insufficient food, they have insufficient fuel, and other things that are necessary for them to continue living well.
Or like Iraq, insufficient medical supplies back in the 90s.
Exactly. And there was even an American, I believe he was from Washington State, who tried to send medicine over to Iraq during that time, and he was prosecuted by the U.S. government.
Oh, wow.
So it's a very real threat to people's lives when the U.S. imposes sanctions, and because the U.S. can push its weight around, it's often not just the U.S. that imposes the sanctions, but many other countries join in.
Yeah, and the focus of that war, sanctions are an act of war, and the focus is on the innocent population, not necessarily on the governments. The brutal wars that might have occurred in the 19th century were far less brutal because it was just state operatives killing each other. It wasn't the innocent people just starving to death slowly.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think's behind? I mean, I know this Russian thing was kind of a vendetta to get Trump, it seemed like, but now it's kind of moved away, and they've been pretty upfront that the Trump administration didn't have anything really to do with it, and why do you think they had to have known that before they went in? And now it seems like I heard a lot about Facebook. All these Facebook they were posting on Facebook all over, and now you just mentioned Congress having Facebook. The heads of Facebook and Twitter come in, which where they get the jurisdiction to do that, I have no idea. But what do you think's behind it? Because they're not just doing this just for no reason. They're
First of all, I don't
pathetic,
think Mueller's investigation is over.
Okay.
I think this is a pretty weak indictment, as I explained, because the idea that this company or the people in it would otherwise, in this whole blame the Russians for Hillary Clinton losing the election fiasco that people are going through, they would be indicted for not reporting to the FEC and not registering as foreign agents and for coming in as tourists instead of as business people. The idea that would have happened otherwise is absurd. None of this would have been noticed or cared about. But I don't think that Trump is now safe from Mueller coming after him. One reason is that the investigation is known as a Russiagate investigation, but indictments that have already come out have dealt with things other than Russiagate. There's been and Trump could be susceptible to indictments related to, say, business transactions that he's done, or tax evasion, things of that sort.
Right. So it's far more sweeping than just this election stuff.
And as as a member of the Ron Paul Institute board of advisors, Andrew Napolitano has explained, Donald Trump would be in incredible danger if he agreed to speak with Mueller or any of the investigators in Russiagate, because these people are highly trained to get somebody to make a misstatement. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, President Trump likes to speak off the cuff. He's not too careful in what he says, and he could easily be tripped up into making a misstatement that can turn into an indictment and prosecution, grounds for impeachment. So he's definitely in danger for those reasons. But also, they might try to make a case still of some sort of, as they call it, collusion with the Russians related to the election. They've indicted people now who, and there are other people who potentially could be indicted for themselves just making false statements or doing things totally unrelated to Russia, that will find that they have a means to escape punishment or have their punishment much reduced by working with the prosecutors. So if they can work with the prosecutors to concoct some sort of Russia connection with Trump, then and that gets them out of punishment, then they may well do so.
Well, definitely, the Donald definitely has he has a lot of fluid facts. Just call him that. So I could see how they could trip him up pretty easily, and not, I think that was it Biden said, he even admitted kind of that Trump wouldn't necessarily try to be misleading, but just the way they do their job, they trick him into saying something. You lied under oath. Here we go. Now we're going to get you.
Joe Biden, who's no friend of Donald Trump, pretty much backed up the conclusion and the reasoning of Andrew Napolitano. And another thing Napolitano said is that even though Trump has been in a bunch of depositions related to business matters, that doesn't mean that he has the experience necessary to do well in this sort of questioning. And the reason is, when you have those depositions in business matters, they're about, say, contracts and negotiations and so forth. Each side has all the documents. They have all the information about what the dispute is. And Trump comes into those depositions with full knowledge. But it's very different when you're dealing with this sort of interview with people who are out to prosecute you, because they have tons of information that you don't have. Of all their interviews with the people they've indicted, interviews with people they haven't indicted, and Mueller and his associates would come in with all that information that Trump doesn't have. They might have surveillance information of conversations that Trump has taken part in, and all they have to do is get him to trip him up and make a false statement about something, unintentionally even, and that's it. That's it. They can indict him.
Yeah, and they don't record those meetings with the FBI either, and you're not allowed to record them. They just write the notes down on paper, and anytime they could go change them.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, hopefully, if he did do one, they'd be smart enough to require it to be recorded. But you're right. A lot of times, that is what happens. The FBI comes in there, and there's two agents, and one of them will be asking you questions, and the other one will be taking notes. And it's his notes that define what happened there. Mm-hmm. That leaves you at that person's the mercy of that person's note taking. Mm-hmm. He could just make something up. He could give it a spin that's very different than what you intended, or whatever. You also lose the benefit of recording that gives inflection, and and extra meaning to both the questions and the answers as well.
Yeah, and it's pretty well known that 90% of communication is nonverbal. It's tone of voice and body language, and that's all lost in those 302 reports.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, going even back to these Russian operatives, which I don't think they were, and what you're saying about the First Amendment, Adam, that's the most disturbing part of the whole thing. Especially, I think they're going to use it to be able to, not that they're not already, but use it to be able to work their way into social media stuff and spy on that even more. I mean, we have. Last week we talked about a guy named St. George Tucker, who wrote the first commentary on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and he made it pretty explicit in there that they intended for the Bill of Rights, like the First Amendment, to be for all people, not just for quote-unquote American citizens. There were no American citizens before. Anyways.
right.
So, I mean, according to him, the freedom of speech isn't just for you and me, it's for these Russians that happen to be here doing whatever. And and what are they worried about if they say that they had no impact?
Right.
I mean, this could just, make hay while the sun's shining. I just see if they could just randomly pick anyone they wanted for anything. This just happens to be the Russians because they're trying to do whatever they can to Russia for some stupid reason.
Well,
but
yeah, it's
like I said, what if I talk to my uncle? Your in-laws come over, anything like that.
Yeah, well,
what if they
essentially-
persuade you to vote the wrong way?
Yeah, well, and it essentially it's a conspiracy charge, which the only reason they bring conspiracy charges is because they don't have any proof to prove a crime actually occurred.
Right. You wanted
They have to create a story. The whole purpose of a conspiracy charge is to create a story, a fictional one, and that's essentially what this sounds like.
Do they have to get? I don't know. That's just mind-numbing. This kind of feeds right into the, I think anyways, with all the FISA court actions that have been going on and the more information we're finding out about those, where these FISA warrants or whatever they're called, 99.9% approval rating.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it basically in this, Americans are not the brightest people at times, so I can see a lot of them going, yeah, we got to have our FBI with the power to do these things to these evil Russians, not even knowing that Americans are just as susceptible as some quote-unquote foreign agent.
Right. Well, yeah, they'll test it on a foreign agent first. Test the precedent.
What do you think about that, Adam?
Well, certainly the FISA warrants are incredibly easy to get there, and they're all done in secret. And you're right. There was it came out a few years ago that over 99.9% were granted. They've been so broad that they grant the ability to basically snoop on the communications of everybody who uses, say, Verizon in the whole country. Of course they're spying on people in other countries as well. Some of the spying through the U.S. mass surveillance program, this done in conjunction with what they call the Five Eyes, which is the kind of the old British Commonwealth English-speaking countries. United States, Australia, Britain, Canada. They were spying on the energy sector of companies and the comparable to the Department of Energy of the U.S. down in Brazil, and looked like industrial espionage. In Mexican elections in the past, they were spying on candidates that were amenable to legalization of drugs. So this spying is not about terrorism. It can be sometimes, but it's about these sorts of other things as well. And if you look at what happened, that was revealed in the Nunes memo, where the FISA court was relying upon the Steele dossier, dossier, which is not substantiated, which looks like it's a compilation largely of made up information, but it was enough to help obtain a means to investigate further people involved in the Trump campaign. So that itself is worrisome as well on a different level. First of all, it's very worrisome that our privacy is invaded by the ability of the national NSA and other U.S. government agencies to surveil our activities. But it's also disturbing that this surveillance can be used against people associated with a presidential campaign, and that potentially it could be being used for political reasons to, either aid one side, the Clinton side in that campaign, in that election, or that it could be used for leverage against a candidate such as Trump should he win the election. People should be less worried about Russian influence in U.S. elections and more worried about the influence of the FISA court and the NSA in U.S. elections.
Right, because didn't this whole Russiagate thing started from was a FISA warrant to spy on Trump, wasn't it? From the Obama administration
prior to
the election.
Mm-hmm.
Right, they were spying on people associated with the Trump campaign. That's right.
So it's all full circle here. It's unbelievable. And what is the deal with? Why is there no even a political ramification with an administration spying on a future administration? How does that work? How did they get away with it?
Well, and Nixon resigned from office, after an investigation related to a break-in of the Democratic National Committee's office. Mm-hmm. But and here you have a presidential campaign being spied on. It seems like a similar sort of situation, except the capabilities of the U.S. intelligence agencies to spy on people can obtain much more information than that break-in could have. So it's a level higher. What happened here?
And they were doing it legally, supposedly, right? Because they had a FISA warrant.
Yeah, you'd say it's supposedly legal. It's not what the Constitution's supposed to allow, and it's not what FISA really was intended for. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act was enacted as an answer to out of control intelligence gathering activities, especially in previous decades, and it was supposed to rein that in by putting some judges between the gathering of information, the snooping, and the people who could potentially be snooped on. But unfortunately, those judges just rubber stamped things, and there wasn't the protection that there should have been.
Well, who picks the judges? The administration?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know the details of that, of exactly how they're picked. But they haven't been operating, to protect people's right to privacy, their Fourth Amendment rights at all. But I wouldn't say that a regular, district court judge would be a great protector of those things either.
No.
But they have a better record, at least in the FISA court, and they don't have the level of secrecy that the FISA court has either.
Yeah, this is a pretty clear case of the fox guarding the chicken house. You're asking the government to control itself from doing illegal activities. Mm-hmm. And then the government picks who the government people are going to be to control themselves. And they're getting paid by the same government they're supposed to control. It's obviously it doesn't work. In a private situation, it would be laughable. People would just mock it and laugh and that's silly. But
Well, then on
since
top
it's
of,
government, we assume that they have our best interest at heart.
yeah, and on top of that, you have in this case, the Steele dossier. The DNC paid them a whole bunch of money to produce the dossier, and then they lied to the FISA court to get the warrant. So,
yeah, why aren't people in jail? I mean, they don't. Why isn't no one in jail? Any ideas? You were in the heart of the beast over there years ago. Why doesn't anyone ever go to jail? Is it just because, if we throw them in jail, then they're going to turn around and throw us in jail when we break the law?
Well, that could be part of it. In one of the presidential debates, Donald Trump was talking about Hillary Clinton ending up in jail.
Right.
And that's not happening.
no.
President, she seems to still have protection. Now, in her case, it's amazing. Andrew Napolitano and Joe Biden have, I believe, properly warned Donald Trump that he shouldn't talk to Mueller or any of Mueller's people. Hillary Clinton did talk with the FBI, and everything turned out just fine for her. But in that case, the fix was already in. That she would not be indicted, and even though the Jim Comey, when he announced the fact that she wouldn't be indicted, he basically used the language that indicated that she had been so careless with the classified government information entrusted to her as Secretary of State that she met the standards for being indicted.
Mm-hmm.
He nonetheless, twisted things around and concluded, but we're not going to do it. So I think with Trump, it's been different. I think there has been a concerted effort by people in the Department of Justice, including the FBI, to try to take him down. And we'll see how it ends up happening. Potentially, all of this could be an effort to gain leverage over Trump, and ultimately he could potentially avoid indictment by merely taking the right actions to satisfy the right people.
Right, be a good boy.
He's not a threat.
Do you think that's why he's made some of the decisions that he's made, like agreeing to launch those missiles on Syria, for example?
Well, he had to act presidential. That's why he did that. But, I mean, you look at, remember when he was first took office, and it kind of looked like he might go after the FBI, because he said a lot of derogatory things towards him, and I loved all that stuff. And then he kind of held the olive branch out to him right away. He went and met with them all. And, we love you, I love you, blah, blah, blah. And I think he was trying to get along, because he probably figured out these guys are powerful. And it's kind of just blown up in his face. Hopefully he's learning from this that they're dirty rats. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're not they don't play fair. They don't tell the truth. They're there for their power. And they see him, it seems like they've seen him as for some reason or another, because I just see him as pretty much the same old with what actually happens. Mm-hmm. And yet they see him, seems like they see him as a threat to their power.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't get. Because they're just as powerful as they've ever been. And he loves all law enforcement. He says that over and over and over and over.
Well, I've also seen that change in perception or attitude in the alt-right that used to be libertarian types. Mm-hmm. They used to point out how corrupt the FBI was, for example, but now it's just a few bad guys in the FBI. For the most part, they're good guys wanting to save America.
Yeah,
we know that's not true. Mm-hmm. So, but they seem to be giving into that idea at the same time Trump is.
Well, he better watch his backside, because they'll spank it if he's not.
Yeah.
There's a great writer, James Bovard, who has been trying to dispel some of that new mythology about the the FBI. He's had some great articles. We have them in the featured articles archive at the Ron Paul Institute, where he talks about the FBI's crooked and disturbing history, and talking about things like in Waco and Ruby Ridge, where the FBI was not honest about what it was doing, and did some pretty despicable stuff. So it's a and it goes back to the history of J. Edgar Hoover's long reign over the FBI as well. It's not been a largely spotless organization with a few bad apples. It's had a lot of bad action built into it systematically from virtually the beginning.
You mean like Horiuchi shooting a mother holding a baby in the face with a rifle? Yeah.
Right. That was it.
That was pretty bad.
Ridge that one too, and it's different law enforcement agencies involved as well. In Waco was alcohol, tobacco, and firearms largely also, but there wasn't a reason for those things to have ever escalated in either case. In Ruby Ridge back in what was going on was they were trying to get the father of the family to agree to infiltrate a group and report to the FBI. They wanted him to become their informant, and they got him to saw off a shotgun, and that was the basis for going in after him. But what they did was they went into his property. Some agents, they were on his actual property surveilling him, and that's when his son out with his dogs confronted them, and they shot him. And
14-year-old son.
Yeah, and that's
back.
what
In the back.
spiraled up from there with the U.S. government escalating things, and in Waco with the Branch Davidians, they came in there with overwhelming firepower, and started shooting up the place, and the Branch Davidians fired back and were able to take down a couple of U.S. government agents in doing so. But they didn't need to do that. They were supposedly going after them because, once again, some sort of firearms violation.
Well, David Koresh, didn't he go jogging outside the compound every day?
He was friends with the sheriff.
Exactly. They
could have just picked him up any time, but they wanted to kill those people so that they could have the publicity.
That's right. And they had all their media. They had all their media operations set up, but they didn't have set up ambulances or anything else in case there was the trouble that there turned out to be.
Even Randy Weaver, once the trial happened after it all, his shotgun was not under 18 inches.
Mm-hmm.
It was all fake. They killed all those people for nothing. I mean, not that there is a good reason to kill people, but for nothing. Just because, and he was smart because he was like, I'm not going to spy on my neighbor for you guys. What if they come bump me and my family off?
Right.
Just leave me alone. Oh, no, you don't do what we say, then we're going to kill your whole family. And they murdered his little boy, 14 years old, because they shot his dog, and the boy's like, somebody just shot my dog. So he fires with his .22 and gets shot in the back by an AR-15.
Right.
That's land of the free.
He did exactly what you're supposed to do. You're
Darn
supposed
right.
to defend your property, defend your dog, and here are intruders.
Somebody shoots one of my boys' dogs, they'd freak out. I would too.
And he's defending himself. Once
Exactly.
Somebody's on your property and shoots your dog, you have to suspect there's a good chance they're going to shoot you next.
Yep.
But
yeah, I just don't understand why this agency is still around.
Yeah.
I mean, the Weaver thing, we lived pretty close to that and followed it pretty close and knew people that were involved in it, actually. and the Waco stuff, not as much, but it brought back home to what just happened in Waco, or not. I mean, in Ruby Ridge. But we have friends that lived. I think Jim lived in Waco at the time, or right next to there.
Okay.
Right, directly close in Texas, and
Yeah.
it was just they murdered those people.
Well, you and I both know another person who was supposed to be dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know they tried to toss a silencer or a gun in his hand,
So they could shoot him.
and so that they could shoot him. A whole bunch of FBI agents showed up, and it just by chance the property owner of the property that they were on showed up just before the FBI agents did and warned them, "Hey, there's a bunch of FBI agents around the corner. What's going on?" And that was the reason that they're not dead.
Yeah, because he didn't grab the gun.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked to FBI folks before, Adam, and one of them, I got pretty in his face a little bit about some things, and I was not taken aback, but surprised by some of his answers to things where he flat told me, and I believe that he was, in his mind, he was being honest, that he said, well, I love my country. He said, I'm protecting the Constitution. He said, that's my job. I'm here to protect people and uphold the Constitution. I take this seriously, blah, blah, blah. And, of course, I had a little bit of an argument of what he thought his protection of the Constitution and people were compared to the way I saw it. Mm-hmm. But there's obviously some people in this agency that think they're doing the right thing, and yet we have this agency that's murdered who knows how many people actually they've killed, and how many people they've set up since 2001 to commit quote unquote terrorist attacks that they foil at the last minute. Mm-hmm. Why is this agency still around?
Right. I mean,
where do they even
much of what they do as well is stuff that is enforce laws that shouldn't exist, and definitely shouldn't exist on the U.S. government level.
Yeah, where does
U.S.
the
government
Constitution
crimes,
provide for it?
You can number on the fingers on one hand. It's counterfeiting, treason, piracy, enslavement. Those are the federal crimes. Everything else should be on the state level, and even of everything else, a lot of it shouldn't be on any level.
Yeah, exactly right. That's a good point. Most of it shouldn't be a crime, period.
Exactly. You think of the drug war, for example, which is responsible for the U.S. having such a high incarceration rate. Just get rid of it.
Yep.
There are problems caused by drugs, and people's drug use, but the problems caused by the drug war are much worse. And the problems caused just by people using drugs, those are people's bad choices, and in freedom you have to live with the consequences of those choices.
Right. Right, the consequences will take care of themselves. And it's not always pleasant, the consequences. It's not always something that you want to see someone go through. But the alternative of throwing them in a cage, that makes no sense. The alternative of where we have little babies getting flashbang grenades thrown in their cribs and blown to pieces and living through it because, we thought this person was involved with drugs. Wrong house, sorry. I mean, it's just so out of control, and it's been pretty upsetting with, we're getting to the top of the hour, and I need to take a quick break, Adam, but I do want to keep following up with this one, because I was just, what's his name? Who's the head of the Department of Justice now? Who's pretty much said, we're going to get them dopers.
Jeff Sessions, Attorney General?
Yeah, I want to talk about him and the newest, I forget what city it was or whatever, that it's the new sanctuary city for marijuana smokers. But anyways, we're with Adam Dick. We just take we have to do the news, so about 2 or 3 minutes, and we'll be right back with Mr. Adam Dick from the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity.
Some people call me the space cowboy. Yeah. Some call me the gangster of love. Some people call me Maurice, 'cause I speak a for the pompatus of love. People talk about me, baby, say I'm doing you wrong, doing you wrong. Well, don't you worry, baby, don't worry, 'cause I'm right here, right here, right here, right here at home. 'Cause I'm a picker, I'm a grinner, I'm a lover, and I'm a sinner. I play my music in the sun. I'm a joker, I'm a smoker, I'm a midnight toker.
All right. Some people call me Josh Bennett. And in studio, people call Mike Anderson. Morning, Mike.
Morning.
And on the line here, joining us from the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, we have Mr. Adam Dick. Good morning, Adam.
Hi, good morning.
Hey, I don't know if you heard that that top of the hour news there, where we had Mueller, whatever his name is, saying that he was surprised there were any cyber security people left in Russia. There were so many of them trying to hack the U.S. election.
Well, actually, that was McMaster. That was H.R. McMaster. That was one of Trump's people.
That was McMaster's that just said that? I thought they said the FBI guy. Wow. Mm-hmm. So why are the Trump people saying stuff like that? I mean, how stupid can you be? Well,
exactly. That's a question I have, too. And Donald Trump has sent out a tweet with some similar sort of comments. They somehow think it's in their interest to say that Russia was interfering, the Russian government was interfering in U.S. elections, but Donald Trump wasn't colluding with them. He wasn't helping them do it. and I think it's why would they do that? Here's one reason. McMaster and all the other former generals in Trump's administration, and there are a lot of them in key positions. They want to continue to have this second Red Scare,
right?
Mm-hmm. The Cold War, and it'll produce a lot of money for the military-industrial complex. It will make the military more needed, and its budget to continue to increase. And we saw that in the spending deal that was adopted in the early morning hours of Friday of last week.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. President Trump quickly signed large increases in military spending, and that spending doesn't just go to the military itself. It goes to the major contractors that provide military equipment, that provide the Blackwater type military contractors and so forth. So
let's not forget it. Not just the military made off pretty good, but so did all the wonderful democratic social programs.
That was the deal that was struck, and I actually mentioned that on my audio show, 5 Minutes, five Issues last Saturday. That's what I predicted when I was talking with you. They're in Fairbanks on December 31st, New Year's Eve of 2016. I predicted
2016. Yep, you nailed it.
That in order to obtain his desired increases in military spending and spending on infrastructure as well, that as president, Donald Trump would let the spending explode, including in areas where he had said he wanted to decrease spending. And I said I expected that to happen just like it happened when President Reagan made the same bargain back in the 1980s with Congress.
Right.
And here we are in that same situation. But the only problem now is, compared to then, is that at this point the debt is so much higher than it was then, both in real terms and in any sort of comparison to gross domestic product or any other way you want to characterize it.
Oh, right.
Based on inflation or anything, the debt has exploded, and to make that sort of deal now is is much more dangerous than it was back then. It's dangerous to the American people having a decent economy and a decent standard of living.
I think it might have been you that I was reading a while back, but it was it's a few days ago or something. With the debt during the Reagan administration, it was like somewhere in the 4 or 5 trillion, and GDP was much higher. Where now our debt, or the U.S. government's debt, is higher than the U.S. GDP by far.
Bad shape. We're in bad shape, and Dr. Ron Paul, who's chairman of the Ron Paul Institute, he said that the day of reckoning is coming. This high debt, this high spending, the reduced value of the U.S. dollar, all this is going to come to a head, and at some point that's going to cause the empire to crash down. Because it's just unaffordable.
I remember a few weeks ago, Nancy Pelosi.
Empires in the past as well. The U.S. won't be the first.
Right. I remember Nancy Pelosi kind of let the cat out of the bag a few weeks ago. I don't remember exactly what she was talking about, but she was complaining that, hey, this wasn't part of the deal. The deal was you guys get to increase military, we get to increase our stuff. I mean, she just said it flat out for everyone to hear. And then next thing you know, sure enough, that's what they did across the board. And this, I don't know why infrastructure all of a sudden is a conservative idea, but $1.5 trillion infrastructure.
Well, I did see, and I correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, that they're going to implement or they're talking about implementing a 25-cent per gallon tax to fund that infrastructure.
Oh yeah,
bill.
Oh yeah.
Right, which more than doubles the gas tax.
Well, diesel fuel's already 25 or 24, 25 cents, the federal tax, which is what I use the most, and our company uses diesel fuel, and then.
And you make a very good point in talking about that, because Ron Paul and Daniel McAdams, the executive director, they have a show each weekday called The Liberty Report that they put on YouTube. Yeah. And they were talking about this gas tax, and Daniel was saying that, when you double it, say you have a family of 3 and they drive the average amount, they're going to be paying, between the original and the added tax, they're going to be paying close to $1,000 a year.
Jeez.
Gas tax to the U.S. government. Now, there are also state and local taxes there too. Mm-hmm. So that's very significant. But when you mention the diesel tax, you're pointing to something that people won't think of as readily, and that is that this tax is going to have to be built into the cost of things that people buy as well.
Exactly.
At your grocery store.
At your grocery, everything you see in a store, everything everywhere is hauled by truck drivers, and that diesel fuel costs money, and then they're going to throw another 25 cents. I mean, I was thinking about that just on, I'm not going to do the math, but let's just say I got a job right now where we're working for this company, and I have 8 trucks working there, and they're using 90 gallons every 12 hours per truck. So 720 gallons a day, just those 8. Mm-hmm. And that's not even very much fuel because it's kind of a low fuel whatever. Mm-hmm. But so about 800 gallons a day, that's an extra $250 a day it would cost me. And, the bad thing is that you can't just, no one can immediately recoup that. I mean, you can't go to a customer and just say, hey, guess what? I'm charging you blah, blah, blah more tomorrow. Mm-hmm. You have to incrementally use it, or, I guess maybe some can, but, ultimately it's just another tax on the consumer because you can't afford to just things are tough enough. You can't afford just to eat it, just suck it up. It has to go somewhere. And with groceries and stuff, that's where it'll end up.
And if you had bid out a job, let's say a year or two ago, and the
that's
tax
what
comes
I'm wondering.
you can't just go say to the customer, tax increase, we got to increase our prices on you.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. Which is amazing, because wasn't it Donald Trump that first announced that he wanted that? Mr. Businessman?
Oh, I'm not sure if he was the instigator of it. I do know that he mentioned being open to it months ago, but then he made a more definitive statement in the last few days.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm sure this is something that has a lot of support among politicians up in D.C. So this might be one of those things that can pass with a heralded bipartisan vote.
So they have a tax cut that doesn't, tax cuts don't help everyone across the board, and automatically they have a tax increase that will affect everyone in America.
Well, it is a good point that this is a tax that on the individual level as far as people's driving goes is going to hit people who are the poorest the most, right? Mm-hmm. If you're making the average income, this 25-cent a gallon gas tax is going to hit you pretty hard. If you're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, it's not going to be as significant. And but with the income tax cut, it can be totally wiped out for somebody of a low income,
right?
By increasing the gas tax.
I think I remember not too long ago, Dr. Paul talking about that, where he said something that he didn't really think it would be any tax cut that came along. He said, I don't think it's going to be a straight tax cut. I believe it was him, and he was saying that they may cut it over here, but they'll find a way to raise it over here. So,
right, and the other tax you have that Dr. Paul likes to talk about is the inflation tax.
Right, the real tax.
Right, by increasing the U.S. debt and printing more dollars, the U.S. dollar, each dollar becomes less valuable, and that's a tax that they're able to do in a stealth fashion. People don't understand it, but it reduces your wealth nonetheless.
I would think with the federal government, if they do raise the gas tax, it'll encourage states to do the same thing too. I imagine our governor, who's just a wonderful piece of junk, he wants to double our gas tax. He's been talking about it already. Double it, or 20 cents more a gallon or something like that. And good grief.
Plus income tax and state
and
property
payroll tax. And he wants across the board. Anyways. I don't know. It's just discouraging to see. I was pretty excited when the tax cut happened, and then, but wasn't excited. I know that's one thing that Dr. Paul talks about too. Is it's not just a taxing problem; it's a spending problem. And then they come out right after the tax cut. Boom! Huge increase in spending. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, how are they going to pay for $1.5 trillion in infrastructure? I know what was it Sabrin or somebody was saying, take it out of the military budget?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. That would be a preferable way, wouldn't it? There's plenty of room there to take the money out. Just end all these wars, right? That spends a lot of money. That would fund it by itself.
Just $1 trillion a year. That's not that bad.
Bases you could shut down, especially overseas. The U.S. has military bases in Japan and Germany. I understand that's where a lot of U.S. military forces ended up there at the end of World War II. Yeah. But that was in the 1940s.
That was a while ago.
You think they'd be able to come home by now, right?
You'd be able to rotate them out by now, right?
You would think so.
Exactly, right?
Those countries want us out of there, especially like Korea.
Plenty of room to save money in the military budget. If you really wanted to cut it, what you do is you get rid of the military budget and just have a defense budget. Would be much cheaper.
Right.
Because that's what the military's, to the extent we have one, is supposed to do, is it's supposed to defend America. And that doesn't take all these foreign bases. That doesn't take special operations forces, traveling around and getting into little conflicts every day all over the world. Doesn't take any of that. It's much cheaper than the roughly probably $1 trillion or more spent on the military, because it's not just the over $700 billion that they're now talking about spending for the Department of Defense, but there's also spending in other areas. For example, the nuclear weapons are under the Department of Energy, and the Veterans Affairs spending. Lawrence Wilkerson, he was a colonel in the U.S. Army and was chief of staff for Secretary of State Colin Powell. He's on the academic board for the Ron Paul Institute. He was interviewed recently, and he was talking about the Veterans Affairs costs. How that's going to be over the life of veterans from U.S. wars in Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan and smaller conflicts in places like Niger and Somalia. Over the lives of these veterans that are created by these U.S. wars that were totally unnecessary, we're going to be spending trillions of dollars, for their medical and other help.
Wow.
And that should really be considered part of military spending as well.
It's kind of the unseen cost.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. Yeah, there's, millions of people that have been rotated through in the last few years. So, you have to take care of them the rest of their life. It's sad that we sent them there in the first place. But, jeez. I don't know. When you say that, when you folks at the Institute talk about, unsustainability, it's amazing to me to where I'm almost callous to it, because I've been thinking it's unsustainable since I was a teenager when I first got aware of these types of things. And they just keep chugging along. But I guess, it is unsustainable. I don't know what are they, drives me nuts. Especially with the military. Adam, I don't know if you've read, I was reading a story after I saw it first on the Ron Paul Institute. I think it was the Liberty Report that I saw the talk about the gas tax. So I went to, I just Googled it, and I think it was on MSNBC I read about or something. And I was really surprised. I went to the comments section, where I'd say about half of the people that commented said, well, really, the highway system is the military's highway. And my thought would be, yeah, make them pay for it. But their thought was, so we should be willing to pay whatever they want for the privilege to use the military's road. But I'd say half of the comments in that comment section said that and echoed it. Well, yeah, it's the military's road. We should be willing to pay whatever they want and they were commenting about the gas tax, but it's not even our road; it's the military's.
And they can shut it down at any time too.
Absolutely,
and prevent you from driving on it.
Mm-hmm. It's not ours. Never mind the fact that where did they get the money to build it? Us. Anyways, I know, going on a tangent there. It's just really irritating that. I don't see any end in sight, Adam, as far as the military spending. I don't ever see that going down, ever. The only way I see that stopping or curtailing is a collapse of the dollar, which may be the only way to end these stupid wars that we're in around the world and end the police state in America. But it'd also be pretty terrible for everyone listening. Wouldn't be good for you and me if the dollar collapsed either.
Right.
Off the bat.
But at the same time, it would be.
I'll shut up. I gotta let I'll be quiet. I gotta let the guests go. Sorry, Adam. You take it over.
I would be interested in your take on the Turkey situation, with the U.S. in a bit of a conflict with Turkey over the Kurds right now.
More retardedness.
Well, I just, I think Syria is a very dangerous place for the whole world right now. The U.S. never should have gotten involved. The U.S. was stirring things up. It was supporting protests against the Syrian government, and then it was supporting armed attacks against the Syrian government as well, in an effort to overthrow its government, just in a similar way that it helped overthrow the government of Ukraine, and has helped in other color revolutions around the world. And it was none of the U.S. business who's in charge in Syria. But if the U.S. had stayed out, President Assad would have continued through all this time to be in charge of probably all the territory in Syria. Though there may have been greater moves towards autonomy among the Kurds, nonetheless.
Right.
Those sorts of moves had made progress in Iraq as well. But the U.S. got involved, and now it even has military bases there. Something that we can thank Donald Trump for as president. And at the same time, the Russians have been brought in at the request of the Syrians. And Turkey is occasionally, sending in, more recently more so, sending in troops to deal with the Kurds. There's Iranian and Hezbollah involvement on the side of Syria to help them, and Israel is attacking Syria on occasion using its air force.
And Syria just shot down one or two Israeli F-16s, and then you have the U.S. forces attacked pro-Syrian rebels, which were actually Russians, and killed a whole bunch of Russians this last week.
Not good.
I'm not sure of all the facts on that, because I know the Russian government is denying that there were a bunch of Russians that were killed.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, but there's definitely potential for things to escalate, and for things to be super calm one day and escalate beyond being able to calm them down quickly, overnight. We can, you could wake up in the morning and there could be a much more expanded war than there was the day before, because of all these different military forces trying to control things in Syria. It's a very threatening situation, and one the U.S. never should have been involved in. And during the campaign, one of the smarter things Trump said was that he thought the U.S. could back away, and that Russia and Syria could together handle ISIS. And Russia and Syria largely did. The U.S. did some actions, but it was largely Russia and Syria. But instead, Rex Tillerson is taking on the line of the Obama administration that Assad must go, and he's saying that the U.S. has to be there to counter Iranian influence. It has to be there, for various other reasons, to help the Kurds as well. All these reasons, none of which are in the U.S. interest at all.
At all. At all.
And Syria, similar to Iraq under Saddam Hussein, they'd managed to maintain a government that allowed people of different religious groups to live under one country without total chaos breaking out, and the U.S. has managed to get in there and cause that chaos to break out.
Yeah, and they can't even fall back on the old excuse of, oh well, we need their oil. We need to make sure that they're behaving properly so we get the oil. That doesn't work anymore either, because now the U.S. is the largest producer of oil in the world.
Right.
So
it's frustrating. That's one of the reasons why the military's budget needs to be cut, so they can't go roaming around to and fro, seeking who they may devour. Oh, well, Adam, we have a person calling. Do you mind if we take them, see what they want to talk to you about? And then I'd like to ask you about if you want to, about the shooting that happened here, 2 days ago. See what your
Sure.
opinions on that. So let's see if we can make this happen with the caller. Hello, caller. You're on the air with Mr. Adam Dick.
Yeah, good morning. Frank Turney here.
Morning, Frank.
I'm glad you had Adam on regarding the FBI. I call them the fathers, brothers, and in-laws. Looks like they mishandled one of the most horrific crimes on American soil in our schools, the Valentine massacre of 19 children. And my condolences. I just can't, the pain must be pretty deep here, but I noticed a lot of people in Congress, elected officials and others, want heads to roll in the FBI. And I try to watch, Adam, all the national talking heads, all of them. And, of course, I like One American News. It's a family-owned national TV, but I was watching CNN, what I call the communist network. Lemonhead on there had 3 of the young students from that school, and they want them to talk about gun control. It backfired. All those 3 students were talking about Second Amendment protections at that school. You follow me?
Wow.
And something is missing here. That hero, that coach just stepped in front of and took those bullets. A lot of people are saying he should have been armed, and other people in that school should have been armed. That's the NEA. And some of those Democrats don't want those people armed in that school. I'm not saying all Democrats, but I do know one thing. In Utah, they don't talk about it, but those teachers are armed. And something's got to pass here to protect these young kids in our schools. I don't know if all these lie detectors and all these metal detectors are going to hurt, somebody with that type of a mentality. But listen, the red flags were up. I would hope that Trump hasn't really got into this like the rest of the people in Congress are. But, he liked to say, you are fired. And I hope he does that. This was uncalled for. Not only that, in that was it Parkdale, Florida, the police department, red flags were operated. They had 20 calls at that kid's family from killing animals, from all kinds of abuse. And then the school superintendent and a lot of the teachers were worried about that kid coming to school with a pack sack. All the red flags. And I tell you, I know that the lawyers, I call them ambulance changers, maybe they're needed, they're lined up to sue the FBI. And maybe you can comment that on Adam, and thank you, and God bless those families. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Go ahead, Adam.
Sure. The school shooting is something I'll be talking about. I'm recording my audio show, 5 Minutes, 5 Issues tonight, and I will be talking about the school shooting. I'll be referencing an article that I wrote back in 2015. After some killings in San Bernardino, California, where I talked about some of the exaggerated claims related to guns and mass murder, and I zero in on one thing that's been often repeated in the coverage of what happened Wednesday in Florida, where it's been said that there were 18 school shootings this year.
All right.
And the way that number is calculated is by taking a very expansive view of what school shootings are. And this is the view, and I can talk to you in more detail than I will in the show, and is that any time a gun is fired on basically at school property or where a school event is happening, is considered a school shooting. And that's how they get to 18. There's only been one mass murder or mass shooting this year at a school, and that was the one in Florida and all the others are most of them, a large number of them don't involve anybody actually being shot in these school shootings. They involve a gun going off accidentally.
Is that just,
in a number
just
of
within
cases.
a school zone?
Right.
Thinking they have a fake gun in one instance and it shoots. Another is some kid actually pulled the trigger on a gun that was on the body of like a policeman. There were 2 suicides included.
I remember one. It's a video up on
After
YouTube.
hours in the parking lot by like somebody who wasn't even a student. And the school shootings too. People might not know when they're saying 18 school shootings in this expansive definition. Included in schools are also colleges. And one of these shootings, even one where somebody actually was shot, happened at a sorority house.
Mm-hmm.
But that's being called a school shooting. People wouldn't normally think of that as being such. So it's one way that these the sense of danger is stirred among people, where they think that this sort of thing could, like what happened in Florida, is just around the corner at their local school.
Oh, there was one a few years ago, and the video's up on YouTube of him doing it. It's a police officer in a high school showing off his gun, and he accidentally shoots himself in the foot. So,
right, I've seen that.
That's a school shooting.
Right.
Oh, that's
so. Yeah, when you quote 18 school shootings and you consider what's considered a school shooting, it actually seems really small.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a small number considering 315 million people in the country.
So do you see the FBI being held culpable in this at all?
Well, the FBI won't be held culpable. I mean, you can't sue the FBI for not protecting you.
Right.
You can't, and just like you can't sue the local cops. And courts have dealt with that. There's no obligation for the police to protect you. They might do it in some circumstances, but they're not obliged to under the law.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't sue them like you could say if you have a lawn, a guy who comes and mows your lawn. The guy who comes and mows your lawn, if he mows your garden as well, right, and destroys everything, all your green beans and lettuce, right? You could sue him. You could say that's worth $3,000, right? You could take him to court. And the court might, the court will review things, and they might make him pay you $3,000. It will say or $2,000, whatever they decide. But if a policeman storms into your house and shoots you under based on a warrant that should have never been given, well, that's just your tough luck. Or if somebody kills you or somebody in your family or harms you, and a policeman doesn't do anything to stop it, well, that's your tough luck. I mean, they have a lot of protection from lawsuit.
Well, can't this sounds like a good opportunity
for failure to act. They can always fail to act. That's absolutely protected. You're not going to get any money from the cops if they fail to act.
Right.
On occasion, you can successfully sue for a deprivation of your civil liberties if they act in the wrong way. In an instance, say where there's police brutality. But the issue there is that there's a lot of protection for cops that the average person doesn't have. The average person has the protection of self-defense, but the police have additional protections given their status of cops, and they can exercise force against you that the average person who would be expected to retreat or just go away wouldn't be able to. A cop can instigate a confrontation with you and escalate it in circumstances where an average individual would not be able to excuse doing so.
They can just steal your money and they're fine. Right.
So they on one hand they tell you what guns you can or cannot have. They tell you whether you can even have a gun and where you can carry a gun. And yet, on the other hand, I mean, limiting your ability to defend yourself. And then on the other hand, they say, but if we don't help you or protect you, we're not culpable for that either. Well, is this a good opportunity for the Trump to maybe fire the top 3 heads of the FBI? I mean, I'd do it. That's a good excuse. Because everyone says the FBI had information on it.
Right. And those gun-free school zones, that's, Dr. Paul always had legislation to get rid of that. But fundamentally, too, if schools weren't run by the government, all schools were private, then schools would have more freedom to decide exactly how they want to protect students. And they could do it in plenty of different ways. Schools might look at the statistics and say, we don't think there really is a threat worthy of doing anything, right? A very open policy of not having any sort of security guards, and just leave the doors unlocked, people come and go, whatever. We're not checking IDs of anybody, none of that. And you could send your kid to a school that way, and hey, maybe we're taking a little bit of risk that some person's going to come in and cause trouble. But we like the freedom of access that the school provides. Another school could train teachers and administrators and have a lot of them carry weapons to defend students. Especially for high schools, why not allow the students themselves to carry guns? That's allowed in a fair number of colleges. Now in Texas, it was expanded as well. That you can have a gun on your possession. People forget, high school students. Many of them are 16, 17, 18, a few 19 years old. They can get a job and go work. They can do plenty of things that they're considered adults. Why not have, if a school decides to, a private one, allow them to carry guns?
They can get deployed to foreign wars.
Right. Another thing schools might do is try to adopt other policies that would maybe dampen the inclination of people to take actions like this. And then you're getting into the psychology of what drives people to commit a school shooting. And if you can look into that and figure that, hey, if we change these ways in which the school operates, then people will be less likely to do this, or if they started having this sort of feeling that they might, we might be able to provide something where they could talk to somebody and short circuit the planning. There's all kinds of things that schools could try, and they should be free to do so. But when you get things run by state education boards and local school boards and the teacher unions getting involved, through the government, you don't have that sort of diversity of approaches that could help try to develop solutions to decrease the number of these sorts of shootings, even though they're not as widespread as people think they are, and at least give students and parents options on this as well controlled. They'd have options on how religious issues are dealt with in school and religious education as well. They'd have more options about the athletic programs and the math programs of their students and so forth. They wouldn't have to deal with the out of control crackdown on students not attending class. When I went to school, and it wasn't that long ago when I was in middle school, high school, if your parents didn't want you to go to school someday, you just wouldn't go. And, you might bring in a note or something saying, "We kept my kid home from school yesterday."
Right.
But now a lot of these schools, it's they have this zero tolerance for being truant from school, and they, and that's all tied to the tax dollars. They will get as much money if a kid doesn't come to school every day. So, in order to keep those checks coming, they crack down on the kids and parents, even though the kid might have fine grades and everything, and just skip class so he could do some, go to a museum with his folks or whatever. It's really none of the school's business.
Our school district here will send you a bill if your child doesn't come to school, charging you for the days that they didn't get paid for that kid being there.
Wow.
I know that for a fact because I know people that have had it happen. And, it's just, I was the other way around. My parents wanted me to go to school, and I didn't. But until I was homeschooled. But, instead of having... The government just needs to be out of the education business. They have no right to be in it anyhow. And, instead of these gun-free school zones, we need to have school-free gun zones. Just get rid of the public schools. That's never going to change. It's a corrupt... It doesn't work. Kids are dumber than dirt, and they're getting worse. And, what I really see happening from this, Adam, is that... I think they'll use this as an excuse to even further, I won't say militarize, but, kind of the way that we have the TSA at the airports. I can really see that type of thing happening in schools. Well, I know they are somewhat now, but having these full body scanners and everyone's got to go through it and get patted down, and you go to this room, you go to that room, we check you over here. I would imagine the knee-jerk reaction is going to just be more invasive security at the public schools.
Yeah, that wouldn't be surprising. That's and that would fit right in with this overstating of the threat as well.
Right. Well, we have another caller. Do you mind if we take him?
Sure.
All right. Let's see what they got to say. Hello, caller. You're on the air with Mr. Adam Dick from Ron Paul Institute.
Hello, this is Charles. I'm forming a justificatory or a question here concerning Alaska and specifically and U.S. in general. How long do we have to suffer under a state-directed, dirigist type economy before we realize that it doesn't lead to freedom or prosperity? Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye. I don't know how long. I guess until the dollar collapses. That's the only answer I see.
Yeah, I guess one issue there is that some of us value freedom very highly, but a lot of people value security more. It kind of goes along with what you're talking about with putting, these new types of detectors in schools and so forth, having police in schools, etc., to deal with a threat that's real in some instances, but not as likely to occur as people expect. People value security, and they might jump at the opportunity to have those things in their schools. So they'd be willing to give up the freedom in order to have security. And after, Edward Snowden's revelations about mass surveillance came out, there was a push, and it came rather close in Congress to roll that surveillance back significantly. But there wasn't enough outcry from the American people to end it, and it's been renewed by congressional action signed by the president. So people are valuing security here more than freedom. That's also a reason why the U.S. can continue to get sending its military overseas in all these wars and these CIA actions and USAID and other agencies' actions to overthrow governments is because people have been convinced that there's the danger. The world is a very dangerous place, and that we're under threat from people all over the world, from Iran to Somalia to Venezuela to Ukraine, and that justifies all these covert and military actions. It's not true.
No.
But people aren't even willing to investigate it enough. They just hear that there might be a threat, and somebody who's credible sounding says it. They're like, I don't know for sure, but I'm not taking the risk that something bad might come out of Somalia and get me. So continue to send the military there and continue to fight.
Right, and a lot of those people are and I know a lot of them, your conservative types that are armed to the teeth at their house, and they like to brag about, yeah, anyone go over here, I'll blow them away, I'm half an army by myself, rah, rah, rah. But then they shake in their boots and they think about some guy that can barely feed his family in Somalia, can't afford a pair of shoes, riding a goat across the Atlantic Ocean and coming and killing him and his family. Come on.
So I guess in answer to the question, I think probably before things get better, more people need to be educated about the importance of freedom and the proper role of government. And hopefully we're making progress with that. With your show, with the Ron Paul Institute, with other efforts people are making, so that they can get their priorities right and think of things the way, that more like Thomas Jefferson talked about in the days of the founding of America.
Well, it's an upriver swim, that's for sure.
Well, if what Frank said is true, that three of those students on CNN were talking about the need for teachers being armed in the schools, then there's a little progress right there.
That is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Those are kids we can talk to.
That's positive. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's kids we can talk to. That's a good point, Mike. That's where folks like us, and I know the Ron Paul Institute's doing a lot. That's who you guys are reaching out to, and just getting that fire built in the mind just a little bit. Just get a spark going and saying, of what freedom is. I mean, the government can't protect you. That's all there is to it. It can't protect you. The only way, even if, unless you want to have a police officer in every home in the United States and everyone has a personal police officer bodyguard, even then, it can't protect you. And like you pointed out, Adam, it has no obligation to protect you. No matter what people think, they think they're paying their taxes for their security. They have no obligation to do it.
That's right, but what police will do is they'll enforce all those laws on the books. That's why it's dangerous to have so many laws on the books, and there'll be perverse incentives that'll arise from that as well. For example, you'll have the incentive to stop people for alleged drug crimes in order to seize their assets, and that's one of the dangers you have with.
I
think we
did it drop.
We still got you? You back? I hear some bumping. Oh, we lost him. Yeah. Oh, well, that was... we lost Skype. I'll see if I can pull it back up. It's been a pretty bad connection here lately anyways.
It might be his end because we're getting that delay.
our new bumper. Maybe he lost power. Hey, hang up. I just told him to hang up. Do you even see Skype up on the board? It's not even up there. It's not even up there.
You have to reboot? Oh, okay, you got rid of it.
Oh, live radio. Gotta love it. Well, that was Adam Dick from the Ron Paul Institute. We'll have to have him back on. He was just going to be with us 2 hours anyways. So, folks, remember to check out the Ron Paul Institute at ronpaulinstitute.org. They're the best. That's where Ron Paul, Adam Dick, Daniel McAdams, and some other folks are pushing the truth as hard as it is to do. And as much as, especially I've noticed since Trump was elected, they've been attacked a lot more by conservatives. Mm-hmm. Like, give them a chance. Rah! To do what? Give them a chance for what? I mean, why give a politician
for more drone strikes?
Yeah, why give a politician a chance? They're the problem. The school shooting, Mike. I don't know if you saw some of this, but that one interview with the high schooler that said that she was walking with the shooter down the hall as they were leaving, and she could hear gunshots going off. And she was like, "Oh, I thought you would have been the shooter." Ha ha ha.
Well, she wasn't the only student who said that there were multiple shooters. Several did on news broadcast. And there was another senior at the school in an interview who stated that 1 month prior to the shooting, the Secret Service was there participating in a drill. And that student also stated that now he didn't know the alleged shooter.
Right.
And I do mean alleged because he may not have even done it.
Yep.
What the senior said is that this kid, when he was autistic, he's known to be autistic.
Right.
His father died when he was younger, adopted father. His adopted mother died on Thanksgiving this year, a few months ago. And
oh, hey, we got him back.
Oh, okay. I guess we'll continue next hour on that.
Whoop, whoop. Hello, Adam. We get you back?
Yes. Hi.
All right. Yeah, I noticed that we were starting to get a bad connection there towards the end because I think we were delayed when we were talking back and forth, and then you were skipping out for a little bit, coming back, skipping out. But anyways, good deal. What were we talking about? We were just talking about the school shooting some more when we dropped you.
And I was just saying that you have all these laws on the books, and that there's some incentive for police to take certain actions, such as the drug war provides an avenue for them to seize people's property, such as in stops of people's cars. If they find a bunch of cash or in the trunk, say they'll say we believe this is drug proceeds, and just seize it, and then you have to prove that it wasn't in order to receive it back. So you create a whole bunch of laws and you provide incentives like that to enforce them, and they will be enforced. And the drug laws are particularly pernicious because there's no victim. Yeah. So you have to use techniques like surveillance and paid off informants in order to have the means to nab people for violating drug laws. Nobody's going to complain. And then you have the incentive of being able to seize their property if you catch somebody.
Big bucks.
Maybe even without them, there's a bunch of perverse incentives built into it.
Big money.
Mm-hmm.
Big money. Well, Adam, you had agreed to be with us for 2 hours, and we're knocking on that door. So we'll just leave the last few minutes here for you to tell us about your work in the Ron Paul Institute. And I'm hoping you guys have another get-together this fall, but I'm hoping you guys have it not in September.
Okay, well, hopefully we can do it at another time, because we'd love to have you there. Each year we do put on a conference. We've been doing it in September near the Dulles Airport in Virginia, near D.C., and they've been great, having a whole bunch of wonderful speakers talking largely about foreign policy. And last one, we had a bunch of whistleblowers, including Julian Assange via video link, talking about blowing as well.
Man, I bet that was awesome.
Assange isn't a whistleblower, but his WikiLeaks has helped publicize a bunch of the revelations from whistleblowers.
Yep.
But the Ron Paul Institute deals with foreign policy, promoting non-interventionism, and it deals with civil liberties, protecting people, saying that the purpose of government is to protect our liberties, not to violate them. And the website is ronpaulinstitute.org. So I encourage people to look there. They can see my writing there. They can listen to and read transcripts of my 5 minutes, 5 issues audio show, which is put out once a week. I'll be putting one out late tonight as well. In each issue is 5 minutes long, and I deal with 5 different issues in the news. And just to zero in on the things I'm up to, people can look at my website. That's adamdick.com. And there you can also find on every page a link to my Facebook and Twitter pages that you can follow to keep up to date on everything I'm doing.
Or harass you.
Well, hopefully not. But
Right on. Well, Adam, thank you very much for being with us. We always enjoy it. Always got something to learn from you when you come on, and we'll try to make it not so long the next time, because I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about the next time we get together.
That sounds great. Thank you much.
Thank you. You have a great weekend.
You too.
All right, folks. We got to take we'll be right back.